Okay, so now I've gotten my slip mixed up, and what I did was I just took some bits of paper clay, or this air dry clay, added some hot water to it, and I just kind of chopped it up and stirred it until it looks like, about like yogurt consistency. This has a bit to go yet, but it's still gonna work out. Should be nice and white. So make sure you're using some of the clay to do that. I also know that I want a handle for my piece. So I got this piece and I kind of like worked with it a little bit to knead it, make it the same consistency. Now I'm just gonna smash it out into kind of a rectangular shape. And for this one, I do like to use a rolling pin to make it as flat as possible and really clean. So like I try to make sure it has the same thickness. You can see that I flip it often when I'm doing this. That way I'm not exerting undue pressure on one side more than the other. I don't want to make the middle any thinner than the ends. And believe it or not, it should probably be longer than you think it should, because it has to get all the way around your hand as such. A lot of people forget about that whole aspect. Like, you got to be able to get your fingers inside of there. So before I go ahead and shape it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice this really clean first. Because if I can do anything to finish this out ahead of time before I attach it to my cup, it's going to look cleaner in the end. So I just want to make it a nice consistent slab. I'm just going to kind of like smooth it a little bit. Another good thing to have around here would be like a sponge. That would help. I'm just going to dip my fingers in this and smooth it out a little bit. Add a little bit of slip or water to that. It's also going to like make it a little bit more moist and easier to roll into the shape you want before it cracks, because it will crack if it's too dry. I'm just going to add this all the way around real quick. Just kind of get it smoothed out, get it moist. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to like go ahead and form up my shape first. I think I want to go with like this kind of a look. I'm liking that pretty well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry off on its own a little bit first, because I do need it to dry out somewhat, otherwise it won't keep its shape very well. I'm just going to set that aside. Okay. So now I'm ready to go ahead and start attaching my walls and stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and add the slip to the lip. I don't have to add it everywhere. I've had a lot of students that add a bunch of slip, and then as that water starts to break into the clay, it will weaken it. I've actually had people like paint their entire cup before with slip, and then it destroys the whole thing. So, you want the right amount to get it glued and not too much. So I just kind of squeeze it until I can see some of that slip come out the side. And then I carefully hold it. And then I just take my blending tool, knife, whatever. You can take a popsicle stick and use that as well. This is what I have sitting around, so I'm going to use it. I just kind of blend those two layers together a little bit. You're not going to make it perfect, but you're probably going to have a little bit of a gap out here, and I'll show you how to deal with that in a second. Oh, another thing that I did was I scratched these ends, right, on all of them. That just kind of helps me attach those sides too. I'm going to go ahead and add slip to all of this. Again, I'm going to squeeze this in place. It's important to support your vessel, like with your whole hand, while you're doing any kind of blending, because it's not going to hold its shape until it dries out a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and add my last piece now. So I'll just fit that in there. Give that a little squeeze and push. Okay. So now I'm going to carefully kind of work on that last bit by smoothing inside of there. Again, holding my hand on the outside to make sure that it's like not going to mess up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my pot over because I want to work on these areas here. And this is a nice stable way to hold it. What I'm going to do is take some of my leftover clay that I have here, and I'm just going to make little coils out of it. And that's how I'm going to patch these spots. So I might add a little bit of water to these coils. They've been sitting out now, they're definitely getting nice and dry. I don't want that dryness. I want to be able to manipulate my coils as I see fit. So once I kind of push those in, I can squeeze on the inside and the outside to kind of get that worked in. I'm just going to do the rough building for now, and then later once everything's like stronger and kind of put together, then I'll go around and I'll smooth things out. You can use a sponge to do that, but again, you should probably make sure you have all your stuff structurally sound first. So again, I'm going to squeeze into this little seam here, turn it, work on another little area. So I'm using a combination of like pinch pot, slab construction, coil method. These are all viable ways of making pretty good sculpture and functional work in clay. I just added a little bit more slip to that area because it was starting to get real dry there. And I'm just kind of pushing that in from the inside and the outside. Just want to fill that void if at all possible. This clay is getting really dry. The longer I work on this. There we go. I'll just go ahead and fit that piece in there. So when I work with kids with clay and stuff, I always talk about craftsmanship being an important element. We don't want people that would buy our stuff or this to be a gift from somebody. You don't want people to know exactly how you put it together. You'd want it to look almost like industrially manufactured. So I tell students, you know, if you can see any cracks or you can tell anything about how you made it, you should go back and smooth it even more. Okay, looks like I have a tiny little spot there that I need to push a little bit more into. All right. Couple more little seams here I want to fill up. I always prefer to add too much clay and then smooth it over or carve it away. Better than having thin spots. This one's kind of being stubborn, so I'm going to hold it on the inside and kind of blend it. Whoa! Knew I'd spill that eventually. Good thing I had paper out. Probably good I'm doing this in my office instead of at home so my wife's not angry with me. I'm a messy artist for sure. See, that's starting to split a little bit there. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that part alone. Okay, so when you feel like you have everything patched in pretty well, we're going to flip it back upside down. Now I'm going to use like a spoon and or popsicle stick to kind of get this stuff smoothed off. And even though that this is, you know, this is a red popsicle stick, so you can see the dyes coming off onto my clay. I'm going to be painting this in the end anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. But I just kind of spin it on the table like this. Flip it over, hold the inside a little bit. Just want to get all these cracks worked out. I guess I could have used this stuff here. Let's put a little bit of slip on there to get it moving. Sometimes I'll put it back down on the table and kind of roll it like this, just to kind of help me use the table as a regularizing surface. You got to be careful when you do that though, because sometimes you get a little too aggressive with it. So you got to be super duper careful. So I feel like I'm to the point now where I kind of want to let this dry out just a little bit before I do my final smoothing. The inside needs a lot more too. That's where the spoon comes in handy, because you can use this edge of the spoon to work up from the bottom. And it does take some time and energy. Sometimes I'll like lay it down like this and roll it as I'm smoothing the inside. You can see it's splitting right here, so you do have to be careful about how much pressure you apply to this. And like I'm pulling from the middle up because I know I have a little bit more clay on that pinch pot. Wouldn't be a good idea to push, because you'd be pushing the smaller amount of clay into the heavier amount of clay, and then it's just really not going to give you the intended result you're looking for. Okay, again, the top of this is a little bit cracked, but I'm gonna wait just a little bit till that's a little drier and stronger before I can really start working with that. I just wanna make sure my general shape is good to go, because after it does dry out, I cannot change that. But I can sand it, smooth it, all that kind of stuff, even after it's kind of like almost totally dry. When it's 100% dry, you can carve into it. It gets pretty dry though, so just kind of taking my thumb, smoothing some of those things over. I think I'm happy with it. This looks like it's gonna hold its shape pretty well. So now I'm ready to go ahead and add this. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look for like the messiest part, like right in here, and that's where I'm gonna add it. Maybe this area right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scratch quite a bit right here with the fork. I'm gonna scratch on the top as well. I'm gonna come down to the bottom part and I'm gonna scratch it too. You want to add your clay when it's all about the same moisture content, because if you let this dry out completely and then add this while it's wet, it's going to crack away from each other. You want them to be the same moisture content so that they dry together at the same rate. So again, any of those areas that I know that I want to attach, I've got to scratch both sides. Slip both of them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press this in. I'm going to hold on the inside while I do that. That's pretty important. Same thing down here, only I'm going to put my finger inside. I'm going to squeeze that. And then one thing I always do to my handles is I reinforce with a coil. Like inside of here is a good idea. Take some of that messy slip. It's because it usually needs just a little bit of extra strength in there. And then this is the area that I typically spend a lot of time smoothing out and stuff later. Because I want it to look strong. I don't want it to look like it's connected or disconnected and that I connected them later, kind of thing. So I'm just trying to smooth all that stuff out. Now if you find that your handle is a little bit too wet yet, you can put, you can put a little bit of paper inside of there to kind of hold it, like mine's trying to come down just a little bit. So I think I will. Crumble it up. Something smaller than the hole that I have in there, so that when it expands after I've crumbled it, it'll kind of hold that shape. That looks better. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add one more coil up in here, and then I'm ready to let that dry a little bit. I lost it in my slip. There you are. Go ahead and add this slippy coil on top here. I'm going to kind of hold it carefully and blend. Sometimes I add a little water to it just to get it smoother. Again, remember you don't add too much water, otherwise it's going to be an issue. So, I think I'm ready to let this sit for now. I'll come back to it, finish smoothing it out, and start uploading some photos. Okay, not a bad little cup. Again, not food safe, but I can hold stuff with it. have fun. Should be cool. Now I gotta clean up my mess.